I've been working the overnight evidence intake at the Cuyahoga County Justice Center for 9 months. Not the police department's property room. That's a different building, different staff, different chain of custody entirely. I work in the Judicial Annex, 3rd floor, where case materials come after they've already been logged, photographed, and cleared through the Detective Bureau. By the time something reaches my station, it's supposed to be inert, tagged, described, settled. My job is secondary cataloging. I verify that what's in the box matches what's on the form. I check seals. I confirm case numbers against the digital docket. I photograph discrepancies. I route things to the correct long-term storage wing based on case status: active, pending appeal, closed awaiting destruction, cold. It's meticulous, tedious work, and they staff it overnight because the volume is enormous and the daytime clerks can't keep pace with intake. There are 4 of us on the night rotation. Deshawn handles the vehicle bay. Marcus and Yanel split the narcotics and firearms sections. I do general, which means everything from clothing to documents to personal effects to whatever doesn't fit the other categories. The building is never empty. There are security officers in the lobby, cleaning crews on the lower floors until 2 a.m., and the overnight judge's clerks working on the 7th floor. You can hear the elevator moving at odd hours. The HVAC system is industrial. It makes a low, constant pressure against your ears that you stop noticing after the first week. The fluorescents in my section are the long tube kind, and 2 of them have a visible flicker that maintenance has been scheduled to address since before I started. I want to be clear about something. The work is boring. Methodical. I listen to podcasts. I drink too much coffee from the machine in the break room that always tastes slightly burned. My hands smell like nitrile gloves by the end of every shift. This is not a dramatic job. But there are protocols that exist for no reason I've ever been given. The first one I learned on my second night, when my supervisor, Carol, walked me through the intake queue. She pointed at the color-coded labels on the shelving: green for standard, yellow for biohazard, red for restricted access. Then she pointed at an empty section of shelf at the far end of my row, near the wall where the ventilation duct runs floor to ceiling. If something comes through without a tag, she said, without a case number, without a routing label, you don't open it. You don't move it. You log the time it appeared on the shelf, and you call extension 4012. Someone will come for it. I asked who. She said, whoever answers. I asked what was in them. She said, you won't need to know. I wrote it down in my procedural notebook because I write everything down. Extension 4012. Unmarked items. Do not open. Do not move. Log time of discovery. For the first 3 months, it never came up. Everything that reached my station had paperwork. Everything was sealed and labeled. I forgot about the protocol almost entirely. Then on a Tuesday in November, I remember because it was election night and the building had that residual tension of high-foot traffic all day, I came in for my shift at 11 p.m. and found a box on the empty shelf section. It was a standard banker's box. White corrugated cardboard. No label. No case number. No seal tape. No evidence tag. No routing sticker. Nothing written on any side. I checked the intake log from the day shift. Nothing unaccounted for. I checked the digital queue. Every item listed had a corresponding shelf location elsewhere in the room. This box was not in the system. I did what Carol told me. I logged the time, 11:47 p.m., in the physical ledger. I called extension 4012. It rang 9 times. Then someone picked up and said, location. I said, 3rd floor, General Cataloging, Section J, Shelf 14. The voice said, Time of discovery. I said, 11:47. The voice said, Remain at your station. Do not leave the floor until the item has been retrieved. Acknowledge. I said, Acknowledged. The line went dead. 40 minutes later, a man I'd never seen before came through the security door with a badge I couldn't read at that distance. He was maybe 50. Grey polo shirt. No lanyard. He walked directly to the shelf, picked up the box with both hands, carefully, from the bottom, and left without speaking to me. The security door beeped behind him. I asked Carol about it the next night. She nodded like I'd passed a test. Good, she said. You did it right. I asked how often it happened. She said, every few months. You'll get used to it. If you're listening to this late at night, if you're the kind of person who stays up with stories like these because the quiet hours are when your brain won't stop working, you can subscribe to this channel. I think the people who listen to these things at 2, 3 in the morning understand something about attention that other people don't. That's all I'll say about that. The second box appeared in January. Same shelf. Same absence of any identifying mark. I logged it at 1:15 a.m. I called extension 4012. Same voice. Same script. Same retrieval within the hour, this time by a woman, different person, same unmarked badge, same silence. The third appeared in March. Same procedure. Same result. I was beginning to think of it as routine. The fourth box appeared on April 9th. A Wednesday. I found it at 12:30 a.m. It was different. Same white corrugated cardboard. Same blank surfaces. But this one was heavier. I could tell by how the shelf bowed slightly beneath it. And when I leaned close to log the time, I heard something. Not movement. Not shifting contents. Ticking. Slow. Irregular. Like a cooling engine or a contracting pipe, but enclosed. Coming from inside the box. I logged the time. I called extension 4012. It rang. And rang. And rang. No answer. I let it ring for 2 full minutes. Then I hung up and called again. Same result. I tried a third time at 12:48 a.m. Nothing. I sat at my station for an hour, doing nothing. The box ticked. At 1:30, I called Carol's personal cell, something I'd never done during a shift before. She picked up on the 4th ring, groggy. Carol, it's Naomi. I have an unmarked box on J14. Extension 4012 isn't answering. There was silence for a moment. Then she said, How long has it been there? Found it at 12:30. And you've been calling since then? Yes. 3 attempts. No answer. Another pause. Then, Naomi, stay at your station. I'm going to make a call. Do not leave the floor. Do not let anyone else onto the floor. If Deshawn or Marcus or Yanel come up, tell them the section is closed for a biohazard check. Do you understand? I said yes. She said, and Naomi, don't listen to it. I said, listen to what? She said, whatever it's doing. Stop paying attention to it. She hung up. I sat there in the fluorescent hum with the ticking box 40 feet behind me, and I did what she said. I put in my earbuds. I turned on a podcast, something about Roman architecture, I think. I kept my back to shelf J14. I processed other items from the queue. I did my job. At 2:45 a.m., the security door beeped. 2 people entered. Neither was the grey polo man or the woman from before. These were younger, wearing navy blue coveralls with no insignia. They had a hand truck. They didn't look at me. They loaded the box, slowly, carefully, keeping it level, and left. The ticking stopped the moment they lifted it off the shelf. Or maybe it had stopped before that and I just hadn't noticed through the earbuds. I don't know. I finished my shift. I went home. I slept poorly. The next night, Carol was waiting for me in the break room before shift. She looked like she hadn't slept either. She handed me a new laminated card, same dimensions as my badge, with a short list printed on it. "Keep this in your wallet," she said. "Not in your locker. On your person." The card read, Protocol 4012C, revised. Log time of discovery in physical ledger. Call extension 4012 immediately. If no answer within 3 attempts, call extension 4012B, external line, 216-555-0193. If no answer on either line within 15 minutes of discovery, leave the floor immediately. Exit the building via the east stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Do not return until contacted. Do not open the item. Do not describe the item to anyone not on this list. Do not photograph the item. Do not record the item by any means other than the physical ledger entry. The card listed 4 names at the bottom. Carol's. A name I didn't recognize, D. Vasquez. Another unfamiliar name, R. Chen. And mine. I said, "What changed?" Carol said, "The protocol was incomplete. Now it isn't." I said, "Carol, what's in the boxes?" She looked at me for a long time. Not unkindly, but with something behind her expression that I describe now, looking back, as grief. Anticipatory grief, like she was watching me approach something she'd already been through. "Evidence," she said. "That's what's in them. Evidence that was never entered into any case. Never assigned a number. Never attached to any crime on record." From where? That's the question, isn't it? She left. I worked my shift. No box appeared that night, or for several weeks after. I want to describe what my section looks like so you understand the geography. It's a long room, maybe 80 feet, with industrial shelving on both sides, floor to ceiling. The ceiling is 10 feet. The shelves are 7 feet tall. There are rolling ladders. The aisle between is about 4 feet wide. My desk is at the near end, facing the door. Shelf J is at the far end. Behind Shelf J, there's a solid wall, concrete block, and behind that wall is the ventilation shaft for the building's central HVAC. You can feel the vibration if you put your hand against it. Sometimes, on very cold nights, condensation forms on the wall near the baseboard. I measured the distance once with a tape measure from my desk drawer. My desk to shelf J14, 63 feet. I could see it from my chair, barely. The shelf section was visible if I leaned slightly to the right. In May, I started noticing something I can't fully explain. I was working the queue one night, standard intake, sealed bags of clothing from an assault case, and I glanced down the aisle toward J14. The shelf was empty. I looked back at my work. 10 minutes later, I glanced again. There was a shadow on the shelf. Not a box. Just a shadow, a rectangular darkness on the metal surface that didn't correspond to anything above it that could cast it. I walked down the aisle. When I reached shelf J14, the shadow was gone. The shelf was bare, clean, slightly dusty. The fluorescent above it was working normally. I went back to my desk. I didn't look again that night. 3 nights later. Same thing. A glance toward J14 reveals a rectangular dark patch. I don't approach this time. I just watch. After about 20 minutes, it's gone. The shelf is just a shelf. I told no one. I didn't call extension 4012 because there was no item to report. There was nothing there. It was a trick of light and fatigue and the flicker of bad fluorescence. That's what I told myself. June 6th, 2:17 a.m. I looked up from a stack of intake forms and there was a box on shelf J14. I felt my stomach drop. Not because of the protocols, I knew those now, had the card memorized, but because I had been watching. I had been checking that shelf every 15 minutes for weeks, compulsively, and I had not looked away for more than 10 minutes before seeing it. The box was there as if it had always been there. I logged the time. I called extension 4012. Someone answered on the second ring. Same voice as before, male, flat, procedural. Location: 3rd floor, general cataloging, section J, shelf 14. Time of discovery: 2:17 a.m. Contents: I paused. What? Describe the exterior. White corrugated banker's box. No label. No case number. No seal. Size: standard. 12 by 10 by, maybe 15 inches long. Weight estimate: I haven't touched it. Silence. Then, approach the item. Estimate weight visually. Do not touch. I walked down the aisle. The box sat on the shelf at chest height. I looked at how the shelf bowed beneath it. Moderate, I said. Maybe 8 to 12 pounds. Is there sound? I listened. The HVAC hummed. The fluorescents buzzed. No, I said. No sound. Remain on the line. Do not disconnect. Retrieval is en route. Estimated 7 minutes. I stood there in the aisle, phone to my ear, staring at the box from 3 feet away. The voice on the line said nothing further. I could hear ambient sound on their end. A room, maybe. Other voices murmuring distantly. A phone ringing somewhere. 6 minutes passed. Then the security door beeped. Navy coveralls. Hand truck. Same silence. They took the box and left. The voice said, item retrieved. Log complete. Clear the shelf. The line went dead. I cleared the shelf, which meant nothing, because there was nothing on it. I wiped it with a paper towel. I went back to my desk. Something had changed in the call. They'd asked me to approach, to estimate weight, to listen. That was new. Previous retrievals had never asked me to interact with the box at all, only to report its existence and weight. I thought about this for a long time. July, then August. No boxes. Then September 14th, and this is where things changed for me permanently. I came in for my shift at 11. Normal night. Marcus was in firearms doing his thing. Yanel had called out sick. Deshawn was in the vehicle bay. Carol had left at 6 p.m. like always. At 11:40 p.m., I walked into my section and shelf J14 held a box. But 11:40 p.m. The day shift ends at 6. The evening shift for my section doesn't exist. There is no evening cataloger for general. The section is unstaffed between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. The security door requires a badge. The door log would show who entered. I didn't log the time yet. First, I went to the security door and checked the access panel. The last badge in before mine was Carol's badge out at 5:58 p.m. 5 hours and 42 minutes. No one had entered this section between Carol leaving and me arriving. 11:40 p.m. I logged the time. I called 4012. Answered on the first ring. Same voice. Location. I gave it. Time of discovery. 11:40 p.m. But I need to report. The access log shows no entry to this section since 5:58 p.m. The box was placed without badge access. Silence. Long silence. Then, acknowledged. Noted. Retrieval en route. Remain at station. Wait, I said. How is that possible? There's no other entry point. The windows are sealed. There's no. Remain at station. Do not approach the item. Do not leave the floor. I'm asking you how. Ms. Okafor. Remain at your station. They knew my name. Of course they knew my name. They had a list. But hearing it spoken aloud by that flat voice, in that context, after months of procedural anonymity, felt like a hand on my shoulder in a dark room. I sat at my desk. I didn't approach. 20 minutes later, the retrieval team arrived. Same as before. This time, one of them, a young man, early 20s maybe, glanced at me as they left. Just a glance. Maybe 2 seconds. But his expression was wrong. Not blank, not professional. It was something closer to recognition. Like he'd seen me before, not in this building. Somewhere else. Somewhere I hadn't been. I finished my shift. I went home. I couldn't sleep. The next day, I did something I shouldn't have. I pulled the physical ledger. My section, night shift, January through September. I'd logged 4 unmarked boxes. But the ledger showed more entries than mine. Entries in Carol's handwriting, dating back years. I flipped backward. The ledger went back to 2019. 5 years of entries. Carol's handwriting throughout. Before that, a different hand I didn't recognize, presumably her predecessor. I counted. Between 2019 and my start date, Carol had logged 43 unmarked boxes. 43. I kept flipping. The earlier handwriting, the predecessor, logged 61 in the 3 years before Carol. Over 100 boxes, never entered into any case system, never assigned to any crime, retrieved by personnel with no names, no department, no signature. And then I noticed the dates. Not the discovery dates. Those were irregular, scattered. What I noticed was the gaps. The stretches without any entry at all. I cross-referenced them mentally against something Carol had mentioned once in passing: personnel turnover. Every gap of 6 months or longer corresponded to a period when the night shift general cataloging position was unstaffed. The boxes only appeared when someone was there to find them. I sat with that for a long time. October. November. No boxes. But I was watching now. Not J14 specifically. Everything. The access logs. The security door. The HVAC duct behind the wall. The pattern of condensation near the baseboard. I started staying late. Not much. 20 minutes. 30. Sitting at my desk after my shift officially ended at 7 a.m., watching the daylight staff arrive, watching them walk past shelf J without a glance, watching them not know. In early December, I requested the building's security camera footage for my section. I was told that Section J was not under camera surveillance. The nearest camera covered the security door, badge entry and exit only. There was no visual record of the interior of my section. I asked when the cameras had been removed. The security office told me there had never been cameras in that section. Original building plans, 1997 renovation, no provision for interior surveillance in evidence storage beyond access point monitoring. I asked why. Chain of custody protocol, the officer said. Visual recording of evidence contents before formal processing could compromise case integrity. It's standard for pre-cataloging areas. It made sense. It made perfect legal sense. And it meant that whatever placed those boxes on that shelf did so in the only room in the building with no eyes. December 19th. 1:03 a.m. I was processing a stack of document boxes from a fraud case. Mortgage paperwork, financial statements, nothing unusual. I'd been at it for 2 hours. My coffee was cold. The podcast in my earbuds was a history of early aviation. I took out one earbud to scratch my ear. And I heard it. Not ticking this time. Voice. Very quiet. Coming from the direction of J14. A woman's voice, speaking in a steady, measured cadence. Not whispering, speaking at a volume meant for a listener who was close. Intimate. The way you'd speak to someone sitting across a small table. I couldn't make out words. Not from 63 feet. Just the rhythm. The tone. The fact of it. I removed my other earbud. The voice continued. Steady, calm, unhurried. Like someone giving a statement. Like someone being interviewed. There was no one in my section. The security door had not beeped. The access log would confirm, I checked it later, and it did, that no one had entered since me. I stood up. The voice continued. I took one step toward J14. The voice stopped. Not faded. Not trailed off. Stopped. Mid-syllable. Cut like a recording ended. I stood in the aisle for a long time, listening to nothing. The HVAC. The fluorescence. My own breathing. I walked to J14. The shelf was empty. There was no box. But the shelf, and I noticed this only because I'd wiped it clean after the last retrieval, had a thin film of something on it. A residue. Faintly damp. Slightly warm to the touch when I hovered my hand above it without making contact. I didn't touch it. I went back to my desk. I didn't call 4012 because there was no item to report. There was nothing there. The protocol was specific. You log a box, you report a box. But a voice with no source? A warm residue with no origin? No protocol for that. Nothing on the laminated card. I finished my shift. I went home. I didn't sleep. I came back the next night, and the night after, and every night that week. Nothing. January arrived. Nothing. The shelf stayed bare. February 3rd. I was reading the ledger again, not looking for anything specific, just rereading my own entries and Carol's entries above them, the way you reread a letter you're trying to understand. And I noticed something I'd missed before. Carol's entries weren't all identical. Most followed the same format: date, time of discovery, time of retrieval, item removed, no incident. But 4 of her entries, spaced across 3 years, had an additional notation at the bottom. The notation was always the same 3 characters. VA. That's it. Just VA after the standard log information. 4 times in 5 years. I didn't know what it meant. Voice audible? Visual anomaly? Verified absent? I couldn't ask Carol without revealing that I'd read the full ledger, which I technically had authority to do but which felt, in context, like a transgression. So I waited. And watched. February 28th. The box appeared at 12:55 a.m. I was at my desk. I had been looking at J14 approximately 4 minutes earlier. The shelf was empty. Then I looked up from my screen, and it was there. Standard white corrugated. No markings. Unremarkable in every way. I logged the time. I called 4012. First ring. Answer. Location. I gave it. Time of discovery. 12:55 a.m. Contents. I haven't approached. Approach. Describe exterior. Do not touch. I walk down the aisle. 63 feet. The box sat at chest height on the shelf. White. Clean. Blank. Standard banker's box, I said. White corrugated. No markings. Appears light. No shelf deflection. Is there sound? I listened. Yes, I said. Silence on the line. Describe, the voice said. A woman speaking. Low volume. Steady rhythm. I can't make out words. It's coming from inside the box. Long silence. Then, Ms. Okafor. Return to your desk immediately. Do not disconnect. Retrieval is en route. I stepped back. Then I stopped. Because from 3 feet away, I could hear the words now. The voice in the box was saying a name. My name. Not Ms. Okafor. My first name. Naomi. Spoken in a rhythm, like a list. Like someone reading entries from a ledger. Naomi. Naomi Okafor. Section J night shift. General cataloging. 9 months. 9 months. Naomi. I ran. I didn't walk back to my desk. I ran the 63 feet, phone still to my ear, and I sat down and I said, "It knows my name. It's saying my name." The voice on the phone said, "Remain calm. Do not reapproach. Retrieval in 4 minutes." What is it? Remain at your station. It's talking about me. It has my employment details. What is this? Ms. Okafor. I need you to confirm. Did you touch the item? No. I didn't touch it. I've never touched any of them. Did you touch the shelf surface after the December 19th event? I went cold. No, I said. I didn't touch it. I hovered my hand above it. At what distance? I don't. 3 inches? 4. Silence. Retrieval arriving now. The security door beeped. 3 people this time. Not 2. The young man from before was one of them. He didn't glance at me this time. His face was set, concentrated. They moved quickly, loaded the box onto the hand truck, and one of them, the third, a woman I'd never seen, stayed behind. She walked toward my desk as the other 2 left with the box. She was maybe 45. Short dark hair. A lanyard with an ID I couldn't read. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the chair no one ever uses, the one meant for day shift consultations with detectives. Naomi, she said. I'm Dr. Vasquez. We haven't met. I'm on your protocol card. D. Vasquez. The second name on the list. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer honestly. Not because you're in trouble. You've done everything correctly. But because what happens next depends on accuracy. I nodded. The voice you heard in December, the one without a box present, was it the same voice you heard tonight? I thought about it. Really thought. December had been 63 feet away, indistinct. Tonight had been 3 feet. Clear. I think so, I said. Same cadence. Same register. In December, did you move toward the voice? 1 step. Then it stopped. And tonight? I was already at the shelf. They told me to approach. She nodded. Made a note on a small pad. Naomi, the items that appear on J14 are evidence. That's true. Carol told you that much, and it's accurate. They are evidence of crimes. But they're not evidence that was misplaced or misrouted. They're evidence of crimes that haven't been reported yet. I stared at her. I don't. They contain documentation, physical documentation, of events that are either in progress or imminent. Times, locations, names, details that can be verified after the fact. They have been appearing in this building since 2003. The items are always accurate. The events they describe always occur. Who puts them there? We don't know. How do they get in without? We don't know. What are the crimes? She looked at me steadily. Homicides, she said. Without exception. Every box contains details of a homicide. Victim, location, method, time. Sometimes the perpetrator. Sometimes not. I felt the room tilt slightly. The fluorescent flicker seemed louder. We have used the information in those boxes to intervene in 11 cases, she said. 11 lives preserved because we acted on what the boxes contained. But we've also learned that intervention has a cost. What cost? The boxes became more frequent after we started intervening. Before 2007, 1 every 6 to 8 months. After our first intervention, 1 every 3. Then every 2. Then monthly. The frequency correlates directly with how often we act on the information. So it wants you to intervene. That's one interpretation. Another is that it's training us to depend on it. Another is that by intervening, we confirm receipt, and confirmation increases output. We don't know. We've reduced interventions to minimize frequency. Currently, we act on roughly 1 in 4. And the other 3? She didn't answer that. Naomi, the boxes have never spoken before. In 22 years of this phenomenon, the contents have been exclusively written. Documents. Sometimes photographs. Never audio. Never voice. What happened in December, and what happened tonight, that's unprecedented. Why me? We don't know. But the voice used your name. Your employment details. Information that's in our personnel system. In the county HR database. In the access logs you've been reading. You know I read the ledger. We know everything that happens on that floor. The absence of cameras doesn't mean the absence of monitoring. I thought about the HVAC duct, the vibration in the wall, the condensation near the baseboard, the residue in December, I said. On the shelf. What was it? She paused. Then, biological. Human adjacent. We are still analyzing it. Human adjacent. It shares 96% of its markers with human tissue fluid. The remaining 4% is not in any reference database we have access to. I sat very still. Naomi, I'm going to give you a choice. You can transfer to day shift effective immediately. You will never work this section at night again. The boxes will continue. They've appeared during staff periods only, but we can test whether removing you specifically changes the new behavior. If the voice is tied to your presence, Your removal may revert the phenomenon to its previous form. And if I stay? If you stay, we need you to do something we've never asked a cataloger to do. What? Listen. Deliberately. The next time the voice manifests, with or without a box, we need you to transcribe what it says. Word for word. We believe it may be trying to communicate something beyond the standard predictive content. The fact that it used your name suggests direct address. We've never had direct address before. You want me to be bait. I want you to be a witness. There's a difference. Is there? She didn't smile, but something in her expression acknowledged the question. We'll increase monitoring. You'll have a direct line to me, not 4012, my personal number. You'll have an extraction protocol if anything escalates beyond vocalization. What would escalation look like? We don't know. That's why we need someone there. I want to tell you that I chose to leave. That I transferred to day shift, took the safe path, forgot about the boxes and the voice and the residue. But I didn't. And I need to tell you why, because the reason is the part that keeps me up at night, not the phenomenon itself, but my own reasoning and where it came from. 3 of those 43 boxes Carol logged. The 11 interventions Vasquez mentioned. I went home that night and I looked up homicides in Cuyahoga County between 2007 and the present. The solved cases, the cold cases, the prevented ones that made the news as near misses or anonymous tips. I found them. Not all 11. Some were handled too quietly for public record. But I found 7. 7 people who were alive because someone acted on what was in an impossible box that appeared on an impossible shelf in a room no one could enter. 7 people going about their lives right now. A woman in Palmer. A teenager in Lakewood. A retired teacher in Cleveland Heights. If I left, and the voice stopped, and the boxes reverted to paper, fine. Normal. Someone else could catalog them, and the system would continue as it had for 20 years. But if the voice was trying to say something new, something beyond names and dates and methods, something that could change what was possible, I stayed. March. April. Nothing on J14. No box. No voice. No shadow. I waited. May 1st. Last week. I was alone in the section at 3 a.m. Standard night. Cold coffee. Bad fluorescence. The HVAC humming its constant pressure note. I wasn't looking at J14. I was processing intake, a set of sealed bags from a domestic case, clothing with tags, everything routine. The voice started behind me. Not from J14. From my desk drawer. I froze. My hands went still on the evidence bag I was holding. The voice was there, that same measured, intimate cadence, coming from the drawer where I keep my procedural notebook. My pens. My laminated protocol card. It was speaking in full sentences now. Clear. Close. As if the speaker was sitting in the chair Dr. Vasquez had used 3 months ago. Naomi. Listen. I don't have long in this form. The shelf is not where I am. The shelf is where they look. I need you to not call. I need you to listen without reporting. 11 people are alive. 47 are not. They chose which ones to save. They chose. Do you understand? The boxes held all of them. Every name. They chose 11. Naomi. They chose. I couldn't move. The voice was so close, inside the drawer, inside the desk, inches from my right hand. The next box is for you. Not for them. For you. It will have a name you recognize. Do not call 4012. Do not let them take it. They will not act on it. I know which ones they save. I know their criteria. The name in the next box is not one they will choose. The voice stopped. I opened the drawer. My procedural notebook was open to a blank page. On the page, in handwriting that was not mine, small, precise, slightly slanted left, was a single line. March 7th, 7:30 p.m. 4200, block of Broadview Road, Catherine, Okafor. My sister. A date 12 days from now. I sat there until my shift ended. I didn't call 4012. I didn't call Vasquez. I closed the notebook. I put it in my bag. I drove home as the sun came up over the lake. I have the notebook. I have the page. The handwriting is there, physical, real, in blue ink that isn't mine. I don't know what to do. If I call Vasquez, she takes the information into a system that, according to the voice, chooses who to save based on criteria I don't know and was never told. If the voice is telling the truth, my sister's name won't meet their criteria. They will file it. They will not intervene. Catherine will die on March 7th on Broadview Road. If I don't call, I have 12 days. I can warn Catherine myself. I can be there. I can change it directly. But, if the voice is lying, if this is how the phenomenon escalates, by isolating me from the protocol, by making the threat personal so I'll break the chain, then I'm doing exactly what it wants. I'm separating myself from the only system that has 20 years of experience managing this thing. I'm acting alone on information provided by something that isn't human, that produces biological residue from no body, that speaks from inside locked drawers. I don't know if the voice is trying to save my sister or trying to make me complicit in something I can't see yet. I don't know if Vasquez's team are protectors choosing triage under impossible constraints, or if there's something else, gatekeepers deciding which death serve them. I have 11 days now. I haven't told Catherine. I haven't told Carol. I haven't called any extension. I'm telling you, whoever's listening to this at 3 in the morning, because I need someone to know. In case I make the wrong choice. In case March 7th comes and I was standing in the wrong place for the wrong reason because I trusted the wrong voice. The notebook is in my bag. The handwriting hasn't faded. When I open the page, the ink is still faintly warm. I keep touching it to make sure it's real. I keep wondering if that's the point.